Okay, let's talk about the wiring for this EFI system. So I've got everything hooked up. I've already turned the key on and everything and verified that the fuel pump is working. It clicks on, but unfortunately it's not pumping. That's another problem that we'll talk about. But let me just show you how I ran some of this wiring. It's a bit of a rat's nest right now, but it'll get cleaned up. Once it starts for the first time and we verify everything's good, I'll take care of that. So a couple different ways you can do this however you want. I chose to run the main harness here under the fuel rail. This is your fuel rail. Here's where your main harness goes. These are your connections for each individual injector here, 1 through 6. And then down here in front is some of your different connections. So there's your throttle position sensor. These are some connections here that don't get used for my particular setup. So I just tied them off here. There's your coolant temperature sensor connector, and then your map sensor I put back here. I just ran a vacuum line off of that vacuum nipple. Whoops, it's not focusing. But where that hose clamp is, it comes off of there. And then I ran it under the injectors. Then you make your electrical connection back here. And that feeds into the rest of the harness. So, like I said, it's a bit of a rat's nest. This right here is just more connectors that don't get used for my setup. So down there, like I showed before, is your oxygen sensor bung, and then the sensor's now connected to that. This is the controller for it. It's the Spartan, like it's the 14.7 that comes with it. Right now I just have it tied off here. Like I said, until we get everything figured out, then I'll permanently mount it. All the electrical connections are made. So this pink one, the pink wire actually ties in to this green wire that's part of your main harness here. Red goes to power, white goes to ground, and then there's a second ground, this very thin wire here that connects back to you probably can't see it, but it's where all the engine grounds are on the mounting bolt back there. This is basically the brains. That's the computer. Your main harness connection is here. This comes with the kit. This is a relay, and then your different connections that'll power all of this bit. This gets connected directly to the battery, so I hooked into this connection block here. So main battery power comes off here. That battery cable already ran to here. That's how it was stock. Then there's a second battery cable that runs down to the starter lug, which is that dirty red one you can see there. I'm gonna replace that. That's a filthy piece, but either way. So I ran this new wire. Let me back up. What I did was I bought this fuse block. It's from Blue Sea Systems, which I think they're actually designed for marine use, but it doesn't matter. Electricity is electricity. So I got this 6-gauge wire. I tied it onto this basically distribution block, and then it runs back through here and then supplies power to this fuse block. So let me pull this off. So I have my different fuse connections back here. Never mind those wires. So the red is what supplies power to the relay here. You can see it running up the back there. This relay controls the fuel pump, and you'll see this purple wire here runs back through here and then down through the firewall, and then it goes all the way to the back of the car, which is what supplies direct power to the fuel pump. And I've got an extra 15 amp fuse on that as well. So it's fused here to the relay and then fused going to the fuel pump. This yellow wire is what controls the electric fan. I'll get to that in a little bit. The wiring really is pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just kind of to figure out what you need and what you don't need, because this has different options for depending on what your setup is. If you're using the trigger wheel to send a signal to when to fire the injectors, then there's hookups for that, but this one doesn't use it. It grabs the signal right off the tack, right off the coil. And we'll go over that. So Anyways, this is a nice little fuse block. I think it was like 15 bucks or 20 bucks on Amazon. They come pretty highly rated, so it's nice and sturdy. I just have it screwed in there. And there's room to add 2 more fused accessories if you want to. So we have room for expansion. So let me go to the other side of the car. We'll talk about the electric fan wiring. I've already verified it's working. I've hooked up a switch inside the car where the old carburetor cables came through, the choke cables. So up is on, down is off. It runs off of 2 negatives. So basically what happens is when I flip that switch, this black wire is hooked to the coolant sensor, and it basically overrides this wire, which would trigger, once this coolant temperature sensor hits the right temperature, it would ground this wire out, which turns the relay on, which would activate the electric fan. But by also putting this switch on here, or this wire on here, the switch basically overrides this one, grounds out the relay, and then it turns on. So let's go to the other side and look at that. So I mounted the relay right here along the wheel well. I just used a sheet metal screw to attach it there. So like I said, this yellow wire runs back across over to that fuse block. The red wire here connects into the wiring harness that comes on the fan itself. So you just crimp it together here. I loosely crimped it because I'll obviously want to shorten these wires later. I put a ground right here for now, and it's working. I may change that though, because that's probably not a great location. I ended up running the wiring to this side just because it was easier, rather than trying to take these wires and then run them across the top of the fan. I was afraid they may get caught on something, but we could always change that later. And then your skinnier gray wire here is what runs over to that temperature sensor. Like I said, it grounds out, and that's what turns the relay on. We'll fix all this later, and we'll get that all neat and tidy and run some wire loom and actually run it across the side of the car here and over, so it's not just on top of the engine. But after we verify everything's working okay. And then your orange is your switch power, which I just hooked in here to the fuse block. So in theory, everything should work okay. Like I said, the switch is working, so I don't know why. I can't think of any reason why the rest of this wouldn't work. As far as the rest of the connections for the fuel injection, so this wire connects to the coil, and that's where it grabs your tax signal and, does all the fancy firing and figures out, what your RPM level is, what you need. And then that gray and black wire right there just grounds out right on the coil. That's really it. Like I said, the wiring's fairly basic. It did take me a little time to figure out how I want to run it. That was the hardest part was figuring out how you want to do that. Because there's tons of different ways you can run the wiring. I think I already showed in the trunk where that power wire runs, but I'll show it again. So this is going to be, that's the connection, that purple wire that comes from the relay and then connects to the fuel pump. I put these quick disconnects in there in case I ever needed to disconnect it, which ended up being good because I had to pull this tank out to pull the fuel pump out, which is not working correctly. Then I just used one of those to connect directly to the fuel pump. And then there's a negative wire right there. I had that running right back to this lug right there, and that was working okay. So let's talk about the fuel pump real quick. So unfortunately, it was working, sort of. I don't know if you can see the fuel level. You probably can't, but there's fuel inside that clear colored tube. You can see the bubble moving in there. So it was pumping fuel, but then for some reason, fuel was gushing out the bottom of this thing somewhere up in here. I wasn't getting fuel pressure to the rail, so I stuck a camera inside the tank, a bore scope, and fuel was like, it would look like a waterfall of fuel inside there. So something's not correct, and it's not pushing fuel out this outlet port for some reason. So anyways, Phytech is sending me a new pump. They're going to warranty this one. Hopefully the new one works, because if not, then I don't know what the problem is. Let's talk about one more thing I put on here. So I got this oil catch can from GoodParts, which is, I'll show you the plumbing here, but it comes off the manifold, runs down to the bottom of the tank where the oil collects, and then there's another connection, this hose right there, which runs to where the stock fuel pump was. You can kind of see that brass fitting down there, and it dumps back into the crankcase. And then this hose on the top connects to manifold vacuum. So it runs down here. There's your PCV valve. Connects to that brass union. And then there's another fitting on the bottom of this manifold. So I had to buy this chrome piece extra, but it fits into it's a GM part. Fits into the bottom of this manifold, and that creates vacuum for the PCV valve. And then I put this 3-way connector in, and then this is going to be the brake booster hose. So it's going to be this braided kind of chrome steel one that runs over to the brake booster. So that should create manifold vacuum for the brake booster as well. I think that kind of covers everything. I put this on just because I don't know if you have to. I've seen pictures where some people just put like a K&N filter on here, but I was afraid that it was going to accumulate a lot of oil in there and eventually start just dripping onto the head and just making a mess. So we'll see how that works. I can't think of any reason this wouldn't work unless someone knows something I don't. Please let me know. But I think that kind of covers the wiring. Like I said, fairly basic, but you do have to really pre-plan how you want to do this so you're not accidentally cutting wires too short or changing your wiring 10 different times, which I have done. So anyways, I think that covers it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll have that fuel pump in here shortly, and we'll get this thing on its first start and ready to go. As soon as the fuel pump gets in, this thing's ready to go. Everything else is tidied up. I just need to change the transmission oil, which is currently draining as I speak. I'll get that in later today. I bought some GL4 to put in there, and I think that's that. So thanks for watching, and hopefully the next video is going to be of this thing running. Have a good one.